Welcome to From Dorms to Desks, job hunting tips for those early in their careers, a podcast brought to you by College Recruiter job search site, which believes that every student and recent grad deserves a great career, and hosted by Work Defined. Join our AI co-hosts as they dive into tips, tricks, and insights that will help you land your next part-time, seasonal, internship, or entry-level job. Let's get your career started.
What if the absolute worst thing you can possibly put in a job-seeking message is, like, your actual resume?
It sounds so completely backward, right? I mean, the whole premise of job hunting, at least how we're all taught it in college, is that you have this document, and this document proves your worth.
Right.
And your only real objective is to just, distribute that document to as many decision makers as humanly possible.
Blast it out there.
Exactly. But when we actually look at the mechanics of modern communication, attaching that document is often the exact trigger that guarantees you're just going to be ignored.
Yeah. And that's exactly the premise we are unpacking today on the High Volume Hiring Podcast.
Yeah. Because
it gets at this really specific, almost visceral feeling. Like, if you're listening to this deep dive right now, you have probably experienced that incredibly fragile transition from being student to entering the professional workforce.
Oh, yeah. It's a rough transition.
It really is. It feels like you're standing right outside a massive, beautifully lit office building. You're on the sidewalk, right? And you can look through the floor-to-ceiling glass and see everyone inside. They're walking around with their coffees. They're in conference rooms doing the exact work you literally just went to school for 4 years to learn how to do.
Right.
But you're just standing out in the cold. You have a security badge, which is, your degree, your ambition, your skills. But every single time you swipe it at the turnstile, it just keeps beeping red.
The locked building metaphor, I love that.
Yeah.
It just perfectly encapsulates that feeling of, having the qualifications but totally lacking the access code. The whole system just feels completely impenetrable.
And that metaphor actually comes straight from the source material for our deep dive today.
Yeah.
We're looking at a really insightful piece published by College Recruiter, and it's titled Cold Outreach That Doesn't Feel Cold, a script-free guide for recent grads.
Which is such a good title, by the way.
It really is. And just to give a little context for you listening, College Recruiter operates on this really specific, awesome mission. They believe that every single student and recent grad deserves a great career.
Absolutely.
And equally, the employers should be able to hire them easily. The whole ecosystem shouldn't be this agonizing, right? High volume hiring should be efficient, sure, but it also has to be human.
It has to be human, yeah.
But the way most of us try to get into that locked building is by opening LinkedIn, staring at a blinking cursor, and drafting this incredibly robotic, copy-pasted message that just screams, I need a job, please open the door.
Right, which is exactly why those messages end up straight in the archived folder.
Yeah.
I mean, we really need to look at the behavioral psychology of the recipient here.
Okay, let's break that down.
Yeah, so when a professional opens their inbox, they're not looking for opportunities to give away their time. An inbox is essentially a defensive environment,
That's a great way to put it, a defensive environment.
Right, because they're trying to process information, clear tasks, protect their bandwidth. So when a cold message arrives and it's got a resume attached and a request for a job or an interview, it isn't perceived as an introduction.
What is it perceived as?
It's perceived as a transaction. Or honestly, more specifically, it's perceived as a demand.
A demand for resources.
Exactly. You're basically asking a complete stranger to evaluate you, to take a massive risk on you, and to spend their social capital inside their own organization just to champion you.
Which is the huge ask.
It's massive. And human beings are just evolutionarily wired to be highly protective of their resources. Time, energy, reputation, those are finite. So when the subtext of your message is just, here's my resume, please hire me, the recipient instantly feels cornered.
Yeah, the walls go up immediately.
Totally. And the easiest, safest, and most cognitively efficient way for them to relieve that pressure is to just hit delete and move on with their day.
Wow. Okay, so the traditional transactional approach is fundamentally broken because it just triggers this defensive response. So today, we are going to explore 14 field-tested strategies from hiring experts, coaches, and tech founders who, frankly, see thousands of these pitches.
Thousands of them, yeah.
And we're going to look at how to completely dismantle that awkward defensive networking dynamic. Because the core argument from all of our sources is that the alternative to being transactional is leading with genuine curiosity.
Genuine curiosity. Yes, it requires a complete re-architecting of your objective. You have to stop viewing the professionals inside that locked building as, like, gatekeepers who are just hoarding jobs.
Right.
Instead, you need to view them as storytellers who possess lived experience. If you aren't asking them for a key to the building, right, you're asking them to explain the architecture of the building.
Oh, that's really good. And there's actually a data point in the College Recruiter article that grounds this in reality. They cite this 2021 LinkedIn study showing that job seekers who conducted 10 or more informational interviews were 5 times more likely to land a referral within 3 months. 5 times. 5 times is huge.
Yeah.
But we should look closely at the mechanism behind that statistic, right?
Yeah.
Because it's really tempting to view that as just a numbers game. Like, oh, if you throw enough darts, eventually one hits the bullseye, right? The old spray and pray method.
Exactly. But the success rate there isn't actually about the volume of the outreach. It's about the qualitative shift in the interaction itself. Because when someone actually commits to doing 10 informational interviews, they are forced to practice curiosity.
They have to actually listen.
Yes. They're learning the specialized language of that industry. They're discovering the actual day-to-day problems those professionals are trying to solve. And honestly, most importantly, they're giving the other person an opportunity to feel helpful and authoritative without placing this heavy transactional demand on them.
Which leads directly into a really cool strategy outlined by Phoebe Mendez. She's a marketing manager cited in the article. And Lori Carr, who's a coach and consultant. They advocate for what they call the 10-person plan.
The 10-person plan, yeah, this is brilliant.
It really is. The tactical move here is to set a goal. But the goal is not to get a job. The goal is simply to talk to 10 individuals to learn about a specific field. And Mendez points out that when you explicitly tell the person you're reaching out to, like, hey, I'm talking to 10 people to learn about this industry, it completely alters the dynamic. You are framing the outreach as a study.
Framing it as a study does 2 distinct psychological things, which I love. First, it completely removes the immediate burden of the job hunt from the recipient's shoulders.
Right, they don't feel like they have to hire you.
Exactly. You are no longer a dependent asking for a livelihood. You're a researcher asking for a single data point. And second, it establishes a very clear boundary. A major fear professionals have when they agree to mentor someone or speak with a recent grad is that they're going to become a permanent crutch.
Oh, like they're adopting a puppy and now they have to feed it forever.
Yes. But by stating you are talking to 10 people, you signal that this is a finite, structured project. You look organized, you look intentional, and most importantly, you look safe to talk to.
Okay, I have to pause though and just push back on this a little bit because I can hear the frustration of like a 22-year-old listener right now.
Fair enough, yeah. Let's hear it.
Like, if my student loan grace period is ending in 3 weeks, and my rent is due on the 1st, my actual undeniable goal is to get a job. So if I approach someone under the guise of doing a research study about their field, isn't that just, a Trojan horse? Like, it feels kind of manipulative, like I'm using fake curiosity to eventually sneak my resume onto their desk anyway. If the goal is a job, why pretend it isn't?
That is the big question. And if it is a Trojan horse, the recipient will recognize it almost immediately, and the strategy will absolutely fail. People are highly attuned to hidden agendas.
We can all smell a sales pitch a mile away.
Exactly. Lori Carr addresses this directly by talking about the concept of posture. The curiosity cannot be a tactic. It has to be a genuine posture.
Okay, what's the difference there?
Well, yes, your macro goal over the next 3 months is to secure employment, obviously. But your micro goal for the 15 minutes you spend with this specific person must be genuinely oriented around learning.
But how do you compartmentalize those 2 things, though? Like, how do you turn off the sheer panic of needing a job long enough to actually care about their career story?
By recognizing that you cannot actually do the job effectively without the context they possess.
Oh.
Right? If you view the job hunt as merely acquiring a title and a paycheck, then yes, asking about their career path just feels like a frustrating detour. You're just waiting for your turn to ask for the job.
Yeah, you're just nodding along impatiently.
But if you view the job hunt as trying to figure out where you actually fit into this massive, complex economic machine, then their experience is critical data. I mean, if you ask a senior analyst what they actually do all day and they tell you, well, I spend 80% of my time cleaning up messy Excel sheets rather than doing high-level forecasting.
That's incredibly valuable intel.
Exactly. You are investigating the landscape. And when a professional feels that you are genuinely absorbing their experience to make your own decisions, they lean in. It is incredibly flattering to be treated as a subject matter expert rather than just, a rung on a ladder.
Okay, so the posture of curiosity isn't just a trick to get them to like you. It's a required state of mind to gather the intelligence you actually need.
Precisely.
That makes a lot of sense. But it does bring up the issue of scale. Like, when you're staring at an ocean of professionals on a platform like LinkedIn, who do you actually reach out to first? Even with a posture of curiosity, strangers still have their guard up.
They do.
But the sources we're looking at, they unanimously point to one specific group that helps bypass that initial skepticism, and that is the alumni network.
The alumni network, yes. Cassidy Blair, who's a licensed clinical psychologist and CEO featured in the piece, she calls this the alma mater bridge.
The alma mater bridge.
Yeah, and it's a foundational concept in cold outreach because it relies entirely on the psychology of in-group markers. When you receive a message from a complete stranger, your cognitive default is caution, right?
Of course.
But when that stranger shares a mutual background, like going to the same university, it creates immediate, unearned trust.
Okay, let's examine why that actually works. Is it really just a sense of nostalgia for the campus? Like, oh, we both drank at the same Gross College bar.
I mean, nostalgia definitely plays a role, sure. But it's actually rooted in deeper mechanisms of tribal belonging. Our brains constantly use heuristics, which are basically mental shortcuts, to determine who is safe to interact with and who requires a higher level of cognitive scrutiny.
Okay.
A shared alma mater is an incredibly powerful heuristic. When you say, hey, I also graduated from this university, you are signaling a shared cultural baseline. You probably navigated the same bureaucratic systems. You might know the same campus landmarks, maybe the same professors. You share a broad institutional identity. Yeah. So you're signaling that you're part of their tribe, which naturally lowers the defensive barriers that normally block cold outreach.
It's kind of like, think about it like being alone in a massive crowded train station in a foreign country.
Oh, good analogy.
Right. Like, you don't speak the language, the signage is confusing, your baseline anxiety is super high, your stranger danger radar is fully operational, you are not making eye contact with anyone.
You're just trying to get to your train.
Exactly. But then, all the way across the platform, you spot someone wearing a faded t-shirt of your favorite, super obscure hometown sports team.
The anxiety just drops instantly.
Completely. Like, you have absolutely no idea who that person is. They could have terrible politics. They could be super rude. But because of that single, highly specific contextual marker, your brain just categorizes them as safe.
Yep.
You would feel totally comfortable walking right up to them to ask for directions. That shared context overrides the default defensive setting.
That is exactly the mechanism of the alma mater bridge. It takes you from the category of random internet stranger to familiar entity within my extended community. People are just mechanically more willing to extend grace, allocate time, and share insight with someone who is in their in-group.
That makes total sense. But, the sources don't stop at just saying message an alum. There's a very specific filter applied to this strategy.
Right. It's not just any alum.
Exactly. McWatis Verk, a recruitment specialist, details the tactical execution here. You go on LinkedIn, you filter by your school, but then you must filter by graduation year. You are specifically targeting people who are 5 to 10 years out of school.
5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Get ready to turn up the volume on your HR game. I'm Jay Arnold, former musician turned HR leader and host of Backstage Pass, the HR Rockstar. Each episode pulls back the curtain on key HR topics, from leadership lessons and bold career pivots to the latest in HR tech and talent strategies, featuring the rock stars within their industries. If you're ready to shake up the status quo and amplify your impact, this is your all-access pass. You can catch the show on the Work-Defying Podcast Network and wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe now, and let's rock the future of work together.
Why that specific window? Like, why not target the person who graduated last year or, the big shot CEO who graduated 30 years ago?
Well, it's an optimization of accessibility and capital. If you reach out to someone who just graduated 1 year ago, they're likely still trying to figure out the landscape themselves.
They're probably still lost in the train station, too.
Exactly. They haven't built enough internal political capital to refer you effectively, and their insight is pretty limited. But conversely, if you target a senior executive who graduated 3 decades ago, they are super insulated.
Right. They have gatekeepers of their own.
Oh, yeah. They have executive assistants managing their inboxes. Their time is fiercely protected. And honestly, their memory of what it takes to get an entry-level job today is completely obsolete.
Yeah. The entry-level landscape 30 years ago is literally a different planet compared to today.
Precisely. They just tell you to walk in and hand them a paper resume. But the professional who is 5 to 10 years into their career, they occupy this perfect middle ground.
The sweet spot.
The sweet spot. They've established themselves. They know how their department functions. They know the hiring managers. They've built a real network. Yet the memory of their own early career struggle is still very accessible. They still remember what it felt like to hold a badge that kept beeping red. So when you reach out to them, you're tapping into a very specific psychological desire. The desire to be the mentor that they wish they had when they were in your shoes.
Oh, that's powerful. And Miriam Groom, the CEO of Mindful Career Coaching, she provides a word-for-word template in the article for how to actually initiate this contact.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth analyzing because it deliberately avoids all those common traps of cold outreach we were talking about.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so she suggests sending this. Hi, Name. I saw you studied at school and moved into field at company. I'm graduating this year and trying to understand how people break in. Would you be open to a quick 15-minute call so I can ask how you got started and what you do differently?
It's so clean. If we dissect that message, every single phrase serves a psychological purpose designed to eliminate friction.
Walk us through it.
Sure. So the opening, I saw you studied at school, that immediately establishes the alma mater bridge we just discussed. The heuristic is activated in the very first sentence.
Right. And then the next clause is, and moved into field at company.
Which signals that the message is bespoke. You know, you haven't just blasted this to 500 random people. You have done the minimum viable research to understand their specific trajectory.
Yeah.
Caroline Frissonnet, another expert cited in the piece, she heavily emphasizes this point. You must provide the recipient with a really clear reason why you chose them, rather than literally anyone else. Identifying their specific field and company validates that choice.
Makes total sense. And then we have the posture of curiosity. I'm graduating this year and trying to understand how people break in.
Notice what's absent there. Right?
Yeah, there's no mention of seeking opportunities or exploring synergies or any of that jargon.
Exactly. It is a simple, factual statement of your current status and your objective, which is just to understand the mechanics of the industry.
And then they ask, would you be open to a quick 15-minute call so I could ask how you got started and what you do differently?
This is the most crucial part. By specifying a quick 15-minute call, you are defining a strict boundary. You're respecting their time and making the commitment incredibly low risk.
All right, anyone can spare 15 minutes.
And more importantly, by asking how you got started and what you do differently, you are casting them as the expert. You're asking them to reflect on their own narrative. And honestly, people generally enjoy discussing their own experiences.
Everybody loves talking about themselves.
They do, especially when it's framed as imparting wisdom. Groom highlights that this template contains 0 corporate buzzwords and 0 demands for employment. It's just engineered to give the recipient a very, very easy path to say yes.
Okay, so the template works. You leverage the alumni connection, you send the low-friction message, and boom, they agree to a 15-minute call.
Great.
But this is where the execution usually falls apart for people, right? You get them on the phone. How do you handle those 15 minutes without it devolving into that hidden job pitch we talked about earlier? Because, I mean, if you spend 14 minutes politely nodding while they talk, and then at minute 15 you slide in, so anyway, is your team hiring? You have instantly destroyed all the trust you just spent 14 minutes building.
Oh, you've completely vaporized it. You've proven the curiosity was just a manipulation tactic.
Right. So how do we avoid that?
Well, to prevent that, we have to look at the framing suggested by Jeanette Brown. She's a relationship and leadership coach who works extensively with early career professionals, and her strategy involves a complete semantic shift.
Okay.
She advises graduates to stop using the term informational interview entirely, just drop it, and to absolutely permanently banish the phrase, pick your brain.
Oh my gosh, yes. The phrase pick your brain needs to be retired. It sounds so invasive.
It really does.
It just conjures this image of like a zombie coming to extract your hard-earned knowledge without offering anything in return.
That's exactly it. It implies extraction rather than exchange. So Brown suggests replacing all those terms with a request for an orientation.
An orientation?
Yeah, you are asking for a 15-minute orientation to their industry.
Let's dig into the psychology of that word. Why does orientation change the dynamic of the phone call?
Think about the context in which we normally experience an orientation. You know, when you arrive at a new university or on your first day at a complex new job, you're given an orientation. The implicit understanding is that you are entering a complex, unfamiliar landscape.
Right.
And you need someone who actually knows the terrain to point out the landmarks, the resources, and the pitfalls. When you ask a professional for an orientation, you are casting them in a highly specific role. They are no longer a gatekeeper whose job is to evaluate whether you are worthy of being hired. They are a guide.
A guide. I really like that distinction. Because a gatekeeper's job is to keep people out. A guide's job is to help people navigate.
Exactly. And when they internalize that role of the guide, the pressure of the conversation just evaporates. They know you aren't going to ask them for a job at minute 15 because a guide doesn't give you a job. A guide gives you a map.
That is such a crucial mindset shift.
It is. And Aditya Nagpal, another founder referenced in the College Recruiter article, he supports this entirely. He observes that from the graduate's perspective, this framing builds confidence because it provides a clear structure for the conversation. You know what you're asking.
Right.
But from the professional's perspective, it feels like an act of mentorship. It feels generative. They are actively contributing to someone's foundational understanding of the field rather than just processing another solicitation.
Okay, so you spend those 15 minutes asking orientation questions. You ask things like, what does a typical Tuesday actually look like for you? Or what software tools do you use every day that they never taught us in school? Or, what is the biggest misconception outsiders have about this specific role?
Those are fantastic questions.
Right, you're gathering intelligence.
Yeah.
I have to ask the logistical question here. 15 minutes is incredibly short. It is enough time for a really pleasant, insightful chat. But if you adhere strictly to this rule of literally never asking for a job, how does an orientation actually lead to employment? Like, how does a conversation about their past result in a paycheck for you?
This is where we have to examine the natural progression of social capital, which the experts in the article map out really clearly. Jeanette Brown notes that when an orientation call is executed well-meaning, you asked insightful questions, you actually listened without interrupting, and you rigorously respected the 15-minute time limit, the conversation almost invariably ends with the professional offering a connection.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They will say something like, based on what you are interested in, you really need to speak to my colleague over in the product marketing department.
The ripple effect. Your network starts expanding horizontally.
Yes. Because real, resilient networks do not grow through cold outreach alone. They grow through trusted internal referrals. If you impress this initial contact with your preparation and your respect for their time, they are organically motivated to introduce you to their peers.
Because it makes them look good, too.
Exactly. It reflects really well on them to bring a sharp, curious young professional into their network's orbit. Furthermore, Miriam Groom observes that once that baseline of trust is established, the professional will often volunteer the next step without you ever having to ask.
Wow.
They might just say, hey, send me your resume and I'll review it, or let me forward your LinkedIn profile to the hiring manager on my team. By not acting desperate, you create this vacuum that they naturally want to fill.
It's almost like relationship judo.
It is.
Like by actively resisting the urge to push for a job, you pull the opportunity towards you. You engineer an environment where the other person feels absolutely compelled to help you. And if we tie this back to the core mission of College Recruiter, that employers actively want to hire great candidates easily, this makes perfect sense from the hiring side as well.
It really does.
Because hiring managers are fatigued, right? They're staring at hundreds of identical resumes from people they know nothing about. When a trusted colleague sends them an email saying, hey, I just had a 15-minute orientation chat with this recent grad, they ask brilliant questions and really understand the market constraints, you should talk to them. That hiring manager is relieved.
So relieved.
You haven't just found a back door into the company. You have actually solved the problem for the hiring manager.
Yes. You have bypassed the massive, noisy, and highly randomized machinery of the applicant tracking system, and you've entered the organization through the mechanism of human validation.
That is so cool. Okay, so up to this point in our deep dive, the strategies we have discussed have been deeply relational, right? Find the alumni bridge, ask for an orientation, treat them like a guide, and build trust over a 15-minute call. And that is highly effective for peers, mid-level managers, and people 5 to 10 years out.
Absolutely.
But the source material takes a very sharp, very disruptive turn when it addresses a different tier of networking.
It does.
Like, what happens when you need to reach out to a senior executive or a lead engineer or a tech founder? These are people who receive literally hundreds of let's grab a coffee or can you orient me requests every single week. The warm relational approach suddenly becomes a liability.
It really does. And the sources present a fascinating philosophical contrast here because while the career coaches we just talked about strongly advocate for the 15-minute orientation, we get a completely divergent perspective from Mohammed Haqqani. He's the founder of Sicario AI Job Search.
Okay.
And Haqqani views the standard 15-minute informational interview through the lens of system efficiency, and he calls it a latency-inducing request.
Latency-inducing request is the most tech founder way imaginable to describe a conversation.
It is so technical, but his underlying behavioral critique is actually profound.
Let's hear it.
Haqqani argues that to a senior leader or a really busy executive, these generic requests for an orientation or a chat, they signal low value and create system noise. His reasoning is that when you ask an executive for general advice or ask them to share their career story, you are actually transferring a massive cognitive load onto them.
Wait. How is asking someone to talk about themselves placing a load on them? I thought we literally just established that people like talking about themselves.
They do in a relaxed social setting, but in a high-pressure professional environment, asking for general advice forces the executive to do the work of figuring out what you need. Think about it. They have to mentally sift through 20 years of experience, select a relevant anecdote, structure it into a coherent lesson, and deliver it to you, all while having absolutely no idea what your actual baseline of knowledge is.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. You are asking them to generate the curriculum for the meeting on the spot. For a busy executive, that is pure cognitive friction.
Okay.
Hey there, I'm Tim Boris, host of the Working Well podcast, where business strategy meets human sustainability. If you're an executive, a leader, or change maker ready to ditch burnout, build thriving teams, and drive real results, this is your next must listen. Tune in on the Work Defined Network or at timboris.com/podcast.
Let me try an analogy here to see if I understand the mechanics of this.
Go for it.
Imagine walking into the kitchen of a Michelin-starred restaurant, right in the middle of the Friday night dinner rush. You walk up to the master chef and say, "Hey, can you give me some general cooking advice?" The chef will throw you out of the kitchen immediately.
Right, because general advice means the chef has to stop, evaluate whether you even know how to hold a knife, figure out if you want to learn about baking or roasting, and then design a lesson on the spot. You are making them do all the work.
Exactly.
But imagine you walk into that exact same kitchen and say, "Chef, I noticed you substitute duck fat for butter in your roux when making this specific sauce. How does that alter the stabilization at high temperatures?"
Oh, the chef's reaction changes entirely.
Completely, because you have just spoken their specific language. You have demonstrated that you already understand the fundamentals of a roux. You aren't asking them to teach you how to turn on the stove. You are engaging them on a highly specific technical constraint that they care deeply about. You have removed the burden of figuring out what to talk about. That is an incredible visualization of what Haqqani calls engaging their builder mode.
Builder mode.
Yes. His solution for reaching out to senior leaders is to abandon the relational script entirely. Do not ask for chat. Do not ask for an orientation. Instead, identify a specific technical constraint, a market headwind, or a product problem that the executive's business unit is currently facing, and send them a hypothesis about it.
He calls this reframing the outreach as conducting user research, right?
Yes. You transition from asking for a favor to presenting research. If you send a cold email that concisely analyzes a recent feature release or, asks a nuanced question about how a new regulatory law impacts their supply chain, you immediately bypass the mental HR filter that automatically deletes job seekers.
And the HR filter is that heuristic we talked about earlier that categorizes emails as demands for resources.
Correct. You completely bypass it because you trigger a different mechanism. Peer validation. By demonstrating that you have done the pre-computation, meaning you've studied their product, analyzed their market, and formulated a coherent thought, you are signaling that you operate at their cognitive level.
You are offering a signal amidst the noise.
Yes. Haqqani observes that candidates who utilize this strategy often skip the traditional resume queue entirely. They provide the ultimate leading indicator of high performance, which is the ability to understand complex context and offer value before anyone even asks them to.
I can absolutely see how powerful that is. But let's break down the how.
Yeah, let's get practical.
Because if I am a 22-year-old recent graduate with an economics degree, how on earth do I find a technical constraint or a market headwind for a company I don't even work for? How do I formulate a hypothesis without sounding incredibly arrogant, like I think I know their business better than they do?
That is the critical execution risk for sure. If you come in sounding like you have the magic solution to their massive problems, you just look naive.
Right. Here's how to fix your billion-dollar company from a 22-year-old.
Exactly. Don't do that. The key is to frame the hypothesis as an inquiry, not a declaration. To find these constraints, you have to do forensic research. You don't just read their marketing homepage. You read their engineering blog. You look at their public GitHub commits.
Oh, wow. Deep cuts.
Yeah. If it's a publicly traded company, you read the transcripts of their quarterly earnings calls. Look at the Q&A section where analysts grill the CEO about declining margins in a specific sector. That is your constraint.
So you find a specific problem they have publicly admitted to having.
Yes. And then your hypothesis is framed as a question about their approach. So you might write something like, I was reading the recent earnings call transcript, and I noticed the discussion around supply chain bottlenecks in the European market. I am currently researching how predictive analytics can mitigate that specific routing delay. Have you found that your current models are struggling with the new customs regulations, or is the bottleneck primarily at the port level?
Oh, man. That is entirely different from, here is my resume. You aren't claiming you can solve it at all. You are showing them that you are thinking about the exact same puzzle they are trying to solve.
You are joining them at the whiteboard?
Joining them at the whiteboard. I love that.
And this perfectly sets up the most compelling anecdote in all of the source material we reviewed. It comes from Reed Taylor, who's a technology leader at Cyber Command.
And in the realm of system noise and defensive barriers, Cyber Command is like the ultimate locked building.
Oh, without a doubt. And Taylor's story is the perfect synthesis of this builder mode strategy. He talks explicitly about hiring engineers, and his advice is incredibly blunt. He says, do not ask for an informational interview. Do not send a resume. Instead, ask someone to review a concrete piece of your work.
So show your work, rather than listing your traits.
Exactly. A recent graduate reached out to Taylor, but he didn't ask to hear Taylor's career story. Instead, this graduate created a 2-page network security assessment of a hypothetical company scenario. He did the actual work of an engineer. He sent that document to Taylor and asked for 15 minutes simply to walk through what his assessment got right and where his blind spots were.
He didn't ask for a job?
He didn't ask for a job. He didn't ask for a generic mentor. He basically said, here is how I process a complex problem. Please critique the architecture of my thinking.
And Taylor agreed to the meeting.
He did.
Why? Because the graduate provided something tangible to react to. Taylor didn't have to generate a topic, right? The curriculum for the conversation was right there in the PDF. It proved the graduate's processing power. But here is the most fascinating part of the story to me. The graduate didn't get the assessment perfectly right.
Oh, he didn't.
Taylor notes that the grad actually missed a crucial element in the security architecture, which was backup redundancy.
And that mistake is what makes the strategy so incredibly brilliant.
Wait, how is failing a technical assessment brilliant? Doesn't that prove he isn't ready for the job?
No, it proves exactly where his baseline is. Most candidates hide behind these abstract claims on a resume. Detail-oriented, problem solver.
Team player.
Right. Those claims are useless to a hiring manager because they are completely untested. By making a concrete mistake on a highly specific piece of work, the graduate showed Taylor exactly what kind of training he would need.
I see.
It removed all the diagnostic guesswork. Taylor didn't have to wonder if this candidate understood threat modeling. He saw the exact boundaries of his knowledge right there on the page. And the vulnerability inherent in asking for a critique built immense trust.
Because it changes the relationship from stranger begging for a favor to junior colleagues seeking peer review.
Exactly.
And the outcome of that story proves it. 3 months later, when a position opened up on Taylor's team, he didn't post the job and wait for resumes. He remembered the graduate because he had already seen him do the work. He had already seen how he responded to critique regarding the backup redundancy.
So he hired him.
He hired him. It's amazing.
It really is. And if we synthesize these two approaches, the relational alma mater bridge on one side and the analytical builder mode on the other, we see that the underlying mechanics are actually identical.
Right.
Whether you're asking a mid-level manager for a 15-minute orientation to the landscape, or you're submitting a concrete hypothesis to a senior executive, you are fundamentally removing friction for the recipient. You are respecting their cognitive load, you are appealing to their professional identity, and you're creating a dynamic where they actively want to engage with you.
It is a radical departure from the dread we talked about at the very beginning of the show. We started this deep dive staring at a locked building, feeling the anxiety of the red blinking badge, and dreading the idea of sending another copy-pasted message.
Yeah.
But what we've extracted from these experts today is that the key to the building isn't finding some master script that magically tricks HR.
No.
The key is a fundamental shift in your posture toward the people inside.
It's the shift from extraction to contribution, from demanding resources to offering genuine curiosity or tangible value.
So let's quickly recap the core toolkit we've developed today for navigating this landscape. First, abandon the search for a single gatekeeper and implement the 10-person plan. Your goal is to find 10 people to study the field, shifting your internal pressure from desperation to research.
Second, identify your in-group markers. Utilize the alma mater bridge by targeting alumni, specifically filtering for those who are 5 to 10 years out of school. They possess the operational capital to help you, combined with the recent empathy of having been in your shoes.
Third, reframe the nature of the conversation. Never ask to pick a brain.
Never.
Ask for a 15-minute orientation. Cast the professional as a guide navigating a landscape, not a gatekeeper guarding a job. And respect that time boundary ruthlessly to trigger the ripple effect of referrals.
Finally, when attempting to penetrate the noise of senior leadership, engage their builder mode. Do the forensic research to identify a specific market or technical constraint. Do the pre-computation, construct a hypothesis, and ask them to critique your concrete work. Prove your processing power before you ever ask for an interview.
It entirely redefines the process of cold outreach. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to address you, the listener, directly. We spent this time focused on how to break into a career, how to bypass the defensive filters of recruiters, and how to connect with professionals when you are on the outside looking in. But if the core behavioral truth we've uncovered today is that transactional demands are processed as system noise, while genuine curiosity is processed as a signal.
Where else in your life might this framework apply?
Exactly, because the applications extend far beyond just the job hunt.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about your current ecosystem. Could you use this show your work strategy to find a mentor within your own company? Like, instead of asking a senior VP in another department for general career advice, what if you brought them an analysis of a workflow bottleneck you've observed and asked for their critique of your proposed solution?
They would be blown away.
They really would. Or, zooming out even further, what about your personal life? How often do we default to rote, transactional small talk? We ask people, what do you do? Or how are you? Without any intention of genuinely engaging with the answer.
We do it all the time. It's just noise.
What if we adopted the posture of the 10-person plan in our daily lives? What if we treated our acquaintances, our neighbors, or our distant colleagues not as background characters, but as storytellers with complex landscapes we want to orient ourselves to?
I love that, because when you cease broadcasting your demands and begin actively investigating the terrain of the people around you, you fundamentally change how you are perceived.
You stop being noise.
You stop being noise.
Something to carefully consider the next time you find yourself staring at a blinking cursor, drafting a message, or standing outside a locked building, wondering how to get inside. Until next time, keep diving deep.
This has been From Dorms to Desks, job hunting tips for those early in their careers, a podcast brought to you by college recruiter job search site, which believes that every student and recent grad deserves a great career. Each episode, we dive into tips, tricks, and insights that will help you land your next part-time, seasonal, internship, or entry-level job. Subscribe to this podcast for free now, so you don't miss an episode, and visit www.collegerecruiter.com to find your next great job.